Welcome to the Frank Rhodes Lecture at Arizona State University. My name is Minu Ai. I'm Vice Chair and Managing Director of the University Design Institute. And on behalf of the organizing team, I want to extend a warm welcome to you all, those of you here in the room and the many that are joining via Zoom. We are going to have an inspiring and thought-provoking lecture tonight, and I can't wait to get us off the ground. We are very honored to have with us Dr. Gerald Chan, our distinguished speaker for this evening. Thank you, Dr. Chan, for your time, your engagement, and the insights that you will share with our community. Before I invite President Crow to introduce our distinguished speaker, I'd like to take a moment to share with you the significance of the Frank Rhodes Lecture Series, particularly for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. The Frank Rhodes Lecture Series was created by President Crow in 2011 to honor Frank Rhodes, who served as president of Cornell University from 1977 to 1995. Dr. Rhodes is widely regarded as one of the most impactful university presidents of the 20th century. His leadership was defined by a bold and unwavering vision that universities must not simply respond to change, but actively shape the educational and cultural landscape of higher education. During his nearly 22-year tenure at Cornell, Dr. Rhodes transformed the trajectory of the institution. He demonstrated an unfailing commitment to expanding student and faculty diversity. He strengthened Cornell's research enterprise, increasing annual research funding from about $80 million to over $300 million. And he led ambitious fundraising campaigns that reshaped the physical and intellectual landscape of the university for generations to come. In 2001, he published a book called The Creation of the Future, a powerful reflection on the responsibilities and possibilities of American higher education. His ideas deeply influenced the development of ASU's model of a new American university, an approach centered on excellence, access, and impact. And in many ways, this lecture is an extension of that vision. Through the Frank Rhodes Lecture, we honor the legacy of bold leadership and transformative change. The scholars we invite are leaders in their own fields. They are people who challenge thinking, advance new ideas, and push us forward into 21st century higher education. Their work compels us to ask difficult questions. Who are we as a university? Who do we serve? And how can higher education remain a force for progress in a rapidly changing world? Excuse me. These lectures are meant to inspire us, inform us, and deepen our understanding of our responsibility to those we serve. They remind us that institutions like Arizona State University must not simply react or adapt to change. We must be ahead of it and lead it. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate this important tradition at ASU. A quick couple of points on housekeeping issues. We will, at the end of the lecture, have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Those of you in the room, please hold on to your questions until then. We know that many who wanted to be here couldn't make it because of commitments and other issues. The lecture is being recorded. It'll be available on the Frank Rhodes Lecture website within a week. Please feel free to share with friends and colleagues. With that, it is my pleasure to invite President Crow to introduce our speaker.
Back in 2001, I was in my office in Morningside Heights in Manhattan in New York City, just off of Broadway and 116th Street, minding my own business. And I read this book by Frank Rhodes. I'm like, what the hell? He's got some fantastic ideas here. So Frank wrote this book, which he referred to when I caught up with him as his, this is the word he used, his apology. about what he wasn't able to do as president at Cornell. Now, Cornell, just to put it into perspective, was founded in 1865 by a guy named Ezra Cornell. And it is an unbelievable school, which is both, on the one hand, an Ivy League university, and on the other hand, a public university. It has public colleges, it has private colleges, it has a medical school in New York City. It's a wonderful, unbelievable school by every measure. It's gone on to do all kinds of powerful things. And in the book, what he was talking about was, how do we take these institutions, these privileged institutions called universities, and how do we make them more impactful for creating the future? Creating the future. Gerald Chan is an individual who, as a distinguished scientist, as an entrepreneur, as a venture capitalist, is a person who is, with every ounce of his energy, focused on that future. He's focused on, how do I make the world a better place by creating new medicines, new drugs, new technologies, new outcomes, new pathways for wealth generation for people with good ideas. How do I make all of that happen? And then he's also taken on the same mission that we've taken on at ASU, and what Frank Rhodes was talking about as he was leaving Cornell, and that is, how do we take these very special institutions called universities and get them to move forward in new ways? So as a philanthropist, he's made major investments at Harvard and the University of Massachusetts and MIT and other places. And from those things, those have all been in areas, if you look at them very carefully, where the hope is an aspirational change in what the universities can do to be of greater service to society. Along the way, we stumble into each other and find a way in which we are married at the hip relative to what can we do as ASU advances in the area of what we now call ASU Health, what we call these things that we're trying to do in terms of moving forward. And so he convened and brought together a little more than a year ago a gathering of deans of multiple medical schools, venture capitalists, everyone that you can imagine. We had this meeting here in Phoenix, and we came together for an extended day and a half to interact with each other on how to design the future, how to create the future. How can you produce more doctors at lower cost with going to people that are already working in healthcare jobs and help them to fleet up from nurse or nurse practitioner or med tech to physician? How do you find a way to change the model of medicine and healthcare? How do you use innovations at every level? And so in these interactions that we've had, and we spend our time talking about design questions. Most universities are not focused on design questions. They're focused on operating questions. They're focused on cash flow. They're focused on all kinds of things. Those are real things everyone has to be focused on. But if we don't find a way to take these very privileged institutions, these universities, these very precious institutions, universities, who are given everything you can imagine. My son-in-law he's applied for his sabbatical from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I'm just shaking my head. Oh my God, like, how would the guy driving the truck 2 towns down understand what a sabbatical was all about? I mean, we are so privileged, so overwhelmingly empowered. How do we take the license that we've been given, the privileges that we've been given, and change up our design so we can have more impact? How do we get a healthcare system that works better? How do we get a university system that works better? How do we produce people better, more cost effectively, more educationally empowered? How do we empower everybody to do things? And so along the way, Gerald and I have become fellow travelers. So he's an architect working on dozens and dozens of investments and companies and so forth, and making these things happen. Immigrant to our great country, which many of us are either immigrants ourselves or the children or grandchildren of immigrants, including my wife. And so he's come to this country with a heart of design, of making things happen, helping universities to move forward in new directions, not just because, he didn't attend ASU, but he knows at ASU, he's got enough individuals who are slightly off. Enough individuals who are slightly off that maybe they can be the ones who can do some new things to change up the way that we can have an impact. So it is really a great honor to introduce Gerald Chan, who I'm not sure what he's going to say because we didn't talk about it. And so we're going to listen to some wisdom from Gerald. So Gerald.
Thank you very much for showing up for this. I'm certainly delighted to be here. I met Frank Rhodes in Ithaca in 2003, and he gave me an autographed copy of the book, The Creation of the Future. I don't think in that meeting, either one of us knew that 20-some years later, I'll be speaking here in his honor. We had no idea. But by accepting the invitation to give this talk, I am subjecting myself to be measured by luminaries in higher education that have taken to this podium before me. Well, one may wonder, why was I invited? I don't work in the higher education sector. But then, having gotten to know Michael quite well, I said, that's exactly the reason why he invited me. As an outsider, not as an insider. And he didn't invite me here to sing harmony to the mainstream of higher education today, which is a refrain that is too overloaded with banality. I think if we were to look at the spirit of this Frank Rhodes lecture series, I saw on the website the banner that says, challenge the status quo. And here I see challenge, disrupt, redefine. So I take that as the reason why I'm here. Now, the comments I'll make today pertains to the teaching mission of university and not the research mission. So primarily undergraduate education as opposed to graduate. I should remind everyone that Frank Rhodes had this wonderful word to say that teaching is a moral vocation. Frank Rhodes came to the orbit of ASU when Michael invited him to help him design the new American university. Now, turn the clock back 20-some years. That was pretty radical at that time to say, American education needs total redesign. Things were going fine. But today, of course, we all know how broken the American higher education system is. And that is generally recognized by the American public. And it's become an imperative that we rethink this whole problem and come up with something that may be radically different. Now, it is no longer acceptable nor feasible for many colleges just to engage in incremental changes on the margin to patch up this or that. For many colleges, and we as a nation facing, the demographic cliff, for many colleges, the threat is really existential. We now read in the news every month some college somewhere closing down. For the nation as a whole, I think we need to be reminded how consequential is the higher education sector to the future of this nation. Whether it be politically, economically, culturally, technologically, it is highly consequential to the fate of this country, especially pertaining to its competitive position in the world stage today. In one sentence, if I may, the problem with American higher education is that it has not changed very much, while America has changed a lot, and the world has changed a lot. Ever since World War II, it's been taken for granted that the nation will be a better place and the lives of the young people will be better if more people would just go to college. And the nation as a whole, in expressing its gratitude to those young people who had served in World War II, created this wonderful thing called the GI Bill to send more young people to university. And for sure, that would be a golden ticket to middle classhood that they would do better than their parents who didn't go to university. When the cost of going to university exceeded affordability, Congress then created these loan programs. And the message was that even if you had to go into debt to go to college, it's worth it. Now, in any credit transaction, meaning there's a lender and there's a borrower, both parties have to have faith that the use of proceeds from this lending will result in the borrower being able to repay that loan. This was an unquestioned belief, and because of that, the federal government today sits on $1.8 trillion of student loan. According to the Education Data Initiative, as of the second quarter of last year, approximately 11% of those loans are delinquent. A couple of days ago, the news just came out by one study, which may be a little suspect, that 1 out of 4 loans are delinquent now. Put that into perspective, the percentage of loans, housing loans, that was delinquent in the run-up to the 2008 Great Recession was 4.5%. Now we're sitting on 11% of delinquency for the student loans. For any commercial bank that lends money, there's always a provision 1 or 2% of those loans would go bad. If a bank had 3% of their loans delinquent, the regulators or the FDIC would be all over that bank. Think about that. And today we're sitting on 11% of this loan program being delinquent. Now, these people who are delinquent, I don't think they're crooks who are trying to game the system or milk the system, but rather there must be a structural gap between what they earn and what they need to live. We as a nation, our great success in convincing young people that they must go to college, regardless of what they study, where they study, just go get a college degree, that has created a surplus of graduates whose education is mismatched with the job skill that the market requires. So, as a case in point, I used to go to this coffee shop in my neighborhood. Every one of the servers are college graduates. I know exactly where they went to college. I know exactly what they studied. And that left me with very little doubt that their job prospects not very good. So this type of underemployment, meaning people doing work, college graduates doing work for which a college degree is not required, this type of underemployment has quietly fomented a nascent political force in this country. It reared its head for the first time last November in the New York City mayoral election, where Zohran Mamdani won handily. It was a three-way race, and even though he only got 58% of the total votes, among young people aged 18 to 29 and who were college graduates, he won 81%. Among the female in that cohort, aged 18 to 29 college graduate, he won 84%. Among young people of the same age group, but who did not go to college, he only won 40%. Among the same cohort, aged 18 to 29, that had lived in New York for less than 10 years, again, he won 81%. The turnout of this block of young voters was 3.5 times more than the usual turnout. And for the first time since 1969, Mamdani won over 1 million votes in this New York City election. The last time this happened was when John Lindsay was elected mayor. If you put all this voting data together, you get the picture that we have a contingent of young people who had come to New York, having graduated from college, looking for their version of the American dream, and that has not panned out. It is that disillusionment that caused this 34-year-old avowed socialist who had never run anything to feel so messianic. 2 weeks after the New York election, the people of Seattle voted in another socialist who had never held public office by a margin of 58%. When the rewards of a capitalistic system are thought to be unattainable, socialism begins to look appealing. In late 20th century, which was a triumphant moment in American history, there was a flurry of scholarly work on why socialism did not take place in America, such as the Harvard sociologist Seymour Martin Lipset, who wrote this book entitled, "It Didn't Happen Here." Subtitle, "Why Socialism Failed in America." There was a very famous historian from Columbia named Eric Foner, and he wrote a very influential paper named "Why Is There No Socialism in the United States?" Their thought was, of course, America had plenty of opportunities and social mobility, and therefore it is not hospitable ground for socialism. Now, all that has changed in front of our eyes. Today, the unemployment rate among college graduates in America is higher than the unemployment rate for the population at large. More alarming is the underemployment rate. The New York Federal Reserve estimates that 41% of new college graduates in 2025 were underemployed, meaning that they were doing work for which a college degree was not required. So, social and political dislocations are fueled by the perceived irreconcilable gap between expectation and reality. All these young people who had moved to New York seeking the American dream, with their view of, or their expectation of earning power being shaped by the immediately preceding generations prior to them, that has not planned out. And if you were to figure in the student loan that they owe, many of these young people today, their net worth, they have a negative net worth. In other words, they've joined the ranks of the proletariat, the group to which socialism looks most compelling as a quick fix. If we drill down further to understand these young college graduates, I'll quote two surveys that were done last year. One is by the Cengage Group and the 2025 Graduate Employability Report, which sums up surveys of recent college graduates, employers, and college educators, published in September of 2025. That report showed that only 30% of the 2025 graduates had found jobs in their field of study. So this was September, assuming they had graduated May or June. But the most shocking disconnect is here. 48% of those graduates felt that they were unprepared to apply for an entry-level job. But the same question being asked to the educators, 9 out of 10 said, oh, the students are well prepared for employment. Huge disconnect. Now, who's out of step with reality? The students or the educators? The second survey was done by the Hull International Business School, and they surveyed 800 human resource managers, 800 employees in various US organizations. 85% of the employees agree with the statement, "I wish my college had better prepared me for the workplace." 55% agree with, "My college education didn't prepare me at all for my job." 77% agree with the statement, "I learned more in the first 6 months of the job than my entire 4 years." 94% agree with, "I have regrets about my degree." From the side of the employers, 75% of the HR managers surveyed agree with the statement, "Most college education aren't preparing people at all for their jobs." So this complaint of school not preparing people for employment has become so loud that it can no longer be ignored. Ever the avant-garde among companies, Palantir has started a program which they call the Meritocracy Fellow Programs, where they recruit students or employees directly from high school. These are very high-performing high school students, and they're saying, "There's no need to go to college. Come here, work here. We'll give you classes for 4 months in leadership, in history, in international relations, and you will be working with the rest of the employees of Palantir." And at the end of the fellowship program, which I believe is 4 months, if you're good, you have a job. And by the way, during those 4 months, they get paid as well. And some of the very high-performing students are very enticed by this sort of program. And I can see in the future being a Palantir Meritocracy Fellow on your resume would be as strong a signaling mechanism as if you had a degree from a highly selective university. Now, how did American higher education and the job market become so separated or drifted so far apart from each other? From the founding of the American Republic, there's been an unwavering belief that education is critical to the health of the nation's democracy. So education was seen as a public good. I remember seeing this book by Leon Botstein called Jefferson's Children, Education and the Promise of American Culture. And I chuckle because are these Jefferson's children or are they the parents' children? But that gravitational pull between democracy and education was so strong that there was this view of the state taking charge of the education of the children. No wonder school choice is such a big problem in this country or such a hot issue. John Dewey, and we come to John Dewey now, he entitled his book, Democracy and Education. And one can hardly find a grander statement on education than what John Dewey said. And I quote, "Democracy has to be born anew every generation, and education is its midwife." Grand words. Much of the inspiration of the post-World War II college curricula came from this 1945 committee report at Harvard, the so-called Harvard Red Book, entitled General Education for a Free Society. It advocated that college students receive general education, which includes exposure to the natural sciences, to humanities, the social sciences. For the students, it averts the fragmentation of knowledge, and for society, such a general education would provide for a common foundation for citizenship in a shared democracy. The prevailing worldview of education coming from that era was that education was in service to democracy. Now, the committee did think about professional education, but it was almost an afterthought, a coda to the total educational journey of the students. So everywhere in the world, and I spent a lot of time in the UK, young people go to university to enter a profession, but only in America is there this perennial tension between higher education being vocational or liberal. America has always had this nagging fear that a narrow vocational education would lead to mutual incomprehensibility among citizens. And that thought was epitomized by that book by C.P. Snow entitled The Two Cultures. The style of education that we call liberal arts education is an American artifact. The Association of American Colleges and Universities defines a liberal arts education as a philosophy of education that empowers individuals with broad knowledge and transferable skills and a strong sense of value, ethics, and civic engagement. So proponents of the liberal arts education argue that such an education prepares the whole person of the learner and not merely giving him job skills. Every few years, I see a new book coming out by some senior professor or some president of a liberal arts college touting, the value of a liberal arts education, and that's fine. And almost the last one, these advocates of the liberal arts education pepper their thesis with a certain dose of anti-vocationalism. And these being mostly humanists, it's not surprising that there is always an undertow towards the past. History, the classics, great literature. And the thought was that that's the domain, and those are the subjects best, for people to have a liberal arts education. John Dewey considered this sort of liberal arts education as rooted in the class divide of society. And he said it's a leisure class against the working class. In the lecture I gave in Berkeley last year, I voiced my objection to this sort of claim, and myself being a businessman, in full disclosure, I said that to me, business, it's a more relatable subject in which you can achieve the aims of a liberal arts education than the study of classics. Provocative, challenge, disrupt. I recently met a accounting professor in a small liberal arts college in New England. And he told me, he himself is a product of that liberal arts college. And he told me how he taught accounting with the aim of giving a liberal arts education. I was blown away. In 1944, John Dewey wrote an article entitled The Problem of the Liberal Arts College. And I will read you some of it here. Nothing is more striking in recent discussion of liberal education than the widespread and seemingly spontaneous use of liberating as a synonym for liberal. For it marks a break with the traditional idea that a certain group of students of studies is liberal because of something inherent in them. I won't go into that. He talked about, such as opium, makes you fall asleep. And he said this sort of view of the liberal arts has a merit for some writers in education of rendering it unnecessary to inquire closely into what the subjects actually accomplish for those who study them. If a particular group of studies is liberal, in and of itself, such an inquiry is irrelevant. Failure to exercise a liberating education effect in given cases is not the fault of the studies, but of the problem with the students. They're just not good enough. That's my words, right? To define liberal as that which liberates is to bring the problem of liberal education and the liberal arts college within the domain of an inquiry in which the issue is settled by search for which is actually, for what is actually accomplished. The test and justification of claims put forth is found in observable consequences, not a priori dogma. I find this statement just blows away all these people that tout, oh, you got to study the classics. Well, you may provide a lot of well-rounded people, but they are unemployed. We really make such an inquiry objectively, trying to assess what higher education has performed in America. I'm not sure the results are that encouraging. The democracy in this country is more frayed than ever. The culture on campus, college campus, is intolerant. The cancel culture is coercive. It is anything but liberating. Meanwhile, our graduates are not getting jobs. In reality, the rhetoric of higher education in service to democracy has long ago lost any authenticity because of the states progressively defunding the public universities over the last few decades. This country has long ago stopped treating the teaching function of universities as a public good to be paid for by the public sector. It is now a private good to be paid for by the consumers. If the loan that these students incur to finance a college education was a commercial transaction, so too is the education that they purchase with these borrowed funds. No wonder in October last year, 63% of those surveyed in a CNBC survey agree that college is not worth the cost because people often graduate without specific job skills and with a large amount of debt to be paid off. That number, so it was 63% in 2025. In 2017, it was 47%. And 2013, it was 40%. It is the slope of that rise that is really quite alarming. In essence, higher education in this country is looking no different from any industry that offers a product to the consumers. And my dear friend Arthur Levine, who was president of Teachers College at Columbia, he even went so far as to say higher education in America is a mature industry. What happens in mature industry? The number of consumers decline, the number of players shrink by either closing down or by merger. And that is what's exactly happening in American higher education today. Many colleges have to merge with others that have a stronger brand name, stronger finance, stronger enrollment. Departments are being combined. Salary to faculty and staff are being cut. That's exactly what's happening. The playbook of a mature industry is being played out in higher education in America today. Well, so into this mix AI, which I won't go into, which displaces a lot of entry-level jobs. The picture is not pleasant. Now, I've been a consumer of talent coming out of university for decades. And I've noticed over the years that people with a liberal arts education, a good one, when they come out of college, they may be at a disadvantage because of the lack of specific job skills. But in the long run, they tend to be able to go farther. So I dare say, and we can discuss this point later, that in this age of AI, a dose of liberal arts education is not bad. So I'm saying all of this not as one who is opposing, liberal arts education. If you want people to do what AI cannot do, or do better some tasks that AI can do, I would submit that a good liberal arts education is not a bad thing. But I wish that no students will have to be confronted with a binary choice of either getting a liberal arts education or getting a vocational education. I think that mutual exclusion is not necessary. And John Dewey, said in that same essay, the outstanding need is the interfusion of knowledge of man and nature, of vocational preparation with a deep sense of the social foundation and social consequences of industry and industrial callings in contemporary society. Now, I really like his use of that word interfusion, which means, what we do in a liberal arts education and what we do in a vocational education, those two should be interfused. They come together. And I would submit that this type of education today is not widely available because people in the vocational education don't feel, well, liberal arts has nothing to do with me. And people in liberal arts says, vocational is sullying, the education experience. I hope that dichotomy can be ameliorated. So, by the way, a lot of these people who tout the merit of a liberal arts education, they said, it gives them, the students, understanding of the meaning of life. I said, well, we need jobs before we can indulge in contemplating the meaning of life. The Maslow hierarchy of of human needs. Anyway, I would say Dewey, I won't take the time now, was also very grounded that the goals of the liberal arts education is not something like, you have a better, more noble taste of culture, but rather, something very practical, that the students have the ability to appraise the needs and issues of the world, or to appraise the surroundings and the course of events. All right. I'm going to venture giving you a list of suggestions of what higher education should think about. This is a pretty extensive list. I'm going to have 12 points. Not everything applies to everyone. I sort of threw in the kitchen sink, and anyway, you think about it. I think these points are not only suggestions for me, but they may be clues as to what the future of higher education may look like. And there's a high chance, high probability that higher education will look very different 10 years from now. So much of my thinking incorporates the potentialities of AI. I'm a big believer that the future pedagogy will be a human AI, collaboration. And I'll talk about some of this. Now, number one, The most important thing for colleges is that we must make the undergraduate education affordable. We talk about the design process. With any design project, you have design constraints. And I would say the first and foremost constraint we should put as axiomatic to this whole design process is it has to be affordable. Otherwise, higher education will price itself into extinction, as many colleges are experiencing. So think about axiomatically, how do we design a great education so that it is affordable and the kids do not, graduate overburdened with debt? Number two, there's nothing sacrosanct about college, the undergraduate experience being 4 years. That is a historical accident. I propose that in the future, we go to 3 years. 3 years of didactic learning or some other forms of classroom learning, and 1 year of experiential learning. I think that experiential learning part is very, very important. And colleges have to do more to help students find internship, co-ops, experiential learning. For most colleges, the career service office is an afterthought. I say that office has to move to center stage of any college, and it has to be tasked with finding opportunity for students to have experiential learning. You all know, many colleges like Northeastern, Drexel, they practice this co-op system very well. And co-op is very good. These students get paid. But for them, more than anything, is to learn to work and also to have an experience, a first-hand experience. What I'm thinking of studying, is this good for me? Is it going to work for me? Number three, we must flip the classroom, use AI to deliver the content, and use the classroom time to work on projects, applications, to talk about meaning of what they are learning and make it relevant to them. I have started a company with some interns this last summer. One young man who had just graduated from college, one young man who just graduated from high school, and one young man who's still in high school. And together we spun up some technology that we can flip any classroom. That if you were a professor and you've taught this course for 15 years, this is your course syllabus, this is your reading material, here's your list of exam questions. We can flip all of that, into using AI and an AI tutor to deliver the content. We are now experimenting with the introductory physics course at Harvard right now, real time. The instructor will put that material up on the website Friday at 5 o'clock, and the students go work on that material. Class time during Tuesday and Thursday. It's all about working on that material after they already have learned it. So flipping the classroom also has the benefit that the more vocational part could be delivered, meaning mastery of skills can be delivered through this AI agent, whereas the liberal arts part of giving meaning and relevance to what is learned can be delivered, in real class time. And that also presupposes some repurposing of the role of the instructor or the professor. Number four, bring in people who had worked outside academia to teach. I think that boundary between academia and industry must become more porous. I talk to a lot of undergraduates because I live and my office is right there at the doorstep of Harvard. And these undergraduates tell me that the professor who had, in this case, a software course, and there is a professor of the practice, and he had worked in Microsoft for a long 10 plus years. He started his own software company. And the kids told me that professor's teaching or the course for them is so much better than professors who had just come up through the ranks of research and publishing. So in fact, I would go so far as to say there should be co-op opportunities for faculty. They should go out there and try to get a job, get a co-op. And if they cannot get a co-op opportunity, neither can their students. Number 5, be intentional in separating the faculty that teach and the faculty that do research. Now, this may be radical, but this was tried in University of Chicago in the 1930s and 40s. And I know my friends who teach math at Carnegie Mellon in the math department, they do this really well. They are professors who are just teaching professors. And I've sat in on those math classes, and I was really impressed by them. Number 6, all students have to be facile in using AI. I mean, this whole notion of AI helps students cheat, banish that once and for all. AI is here to stay. And the students, once they go into the real world for employment, employers look for employees who can use AI effectively. Now, what that means is the assessment part of the teaching function will have to change. Some professors have gone to oral exams, or you have to write the essay, with pen and paper in a room without, connectivity and without your computer. Or you have to do projects, which I'm a big believer of, because that tells me what you can do with what you have learned. In this day and age of AI, when the AI can teach anything and knows everything, what's the point? You know more than ChatGPT? No. It's what you can do with what you have learned. Number 7, we have to broaden the exposure of the students. With AI, anybody can learn anything. But with each one of us, we have the issue of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. If you knew your known unknown, you can go to AI and just learn it. But if you didn't, if you were clueless and you have no idea of your unknown unknowns, you don't know where to go. You are lost soul. So I propose, that college give the student a broad intellectual exposure, and that in time, as they get interested or their work requires them to master certain fields, they can drill down in depth on their own with the help of AI tutor. Take, for example, when I was an undergraduate, I had to take 8 courses in the general education requirement, apart from the engineering stuff. It was a quarter system, 10 weeks a quarter. So I had 8 courses of 10 weeks each. What I propose is students be given 16 courses of 5 weeks each. Broaden their intellectual landscape, get them interested. There is a lot to be said, that much of creativity has to do with connecting the dots. By broadening the intellectual landscape, you give them more dots to connect. And whatever they need, they can drill down with the help of AI in the future to learn it. Number 8, We have to develop diverse modalities of thinking. We talk a lot now about problem solving, which largely has to do with reductionism, which is the scientific method. But there are a lot of problems in this world which are not deterministic enough to render reductionism applicable. So with dealing with these complex, messy problems, there's another order of thinking which has to do with what problems do you solve? How do you reframe the problem such that you can solve a problem that is solvable and have solutions which are workable? So this is in the realm of design thinking. And there are other modalities of thinking, such as abductive thinking, which is inference, quantitative thinking, probabilistic thinking, system thinking, entrepreneurial thinking. There are all these different modalities. Of course, they coexist in the same head, same intellect of the students, or it becomes, the habit of their mind. But when we say a liberal arts education trains the students how to think, we must give form to what is thinking. I mean, we can't just have these empty words help you how to think. What is thinking? Give form to what is thinking and the different modalities of thinking. Number 9, develop the students' social skills. The work of David Deming, who is now the Dean of Harvard College, showed that since 1980, the growth in the labor market has been for jobs that require social skills. Before 1980, people with quantitative skills but not social skills, they fared better than people with social skills and no quantitative skills. But today, the market has flipped. And for those that have quantitative skills, if you have social skills, those skills act as multiplier for your technical ability. Number 10, I propose every student should have some experience of doing a startup. I just spent today listening to the pitch of 6 different groups of students here. And I said afterwards to Roger, I said, every student should have that experience, which means you have to identify some problem, some unmet need. And you have to think about how do you meet that need? And how do you marshal the resources, to do something about that? I'm not saying every business plan by the students will be beautiful and the venture capitalists would invest in it. I don't think so, but it's the experience. It's the experience. Rather than for the undergraduate to do an undergraduate thesis, which tend to be literature-based, and by virtue of being literature-based, it's backward-looking. It's looking what others have done. I think students would be better served if they do a business plan. You identify some unmet need. I tell a lot of these students, if I were to walk from here to 3 blocks from here and come back, I will give you 3 business ideas. Most students are oblivious to their surroundings. And design thinking is grounded in observation. So, number 11, we can't coddle the students with grade inflation, creating the false narrative of students do well when they don't. That serves nobody. Now, I understand students come with different degree and different level of preparation, and this is one of the great injustices of our system, our society today, and that is the affluent. They have so much more educational resources at their disposal than the more disadvantaged. So I recently visited a school where they turn students from all kinds of background into very competent learners. And the head of the school said this to me. He said, what's our secret sauce? The secret sauce, he said, is to go forward, by constantly going backward. In other words, they just keep going backward and see what pieces were missing in the students' prior educational experience, and they go backfill that. And if that's not enough, go back some more and see where the weaknesses are, backfill that. And I saw a young man who, in 2 years, went from a not very accomplished learner to being a very accomplished learner. So, number 12, we have to pay attention to the character of the students. This may sound very old-fashioned, but I've never had a good worker who does not have a good character. And if the students did not get that from their home, maybe the school can still do something through conveying expectations, rules, codes of conduct, tradition, and culture. Now, I know this is a long list. Anyway, whatever you think, I hope it's useful to you. I'm a venture capitalist, and being a venture capitalist, I put financial capital to work to create something that is not in existence as of yet. I invest in what doesn't exist, and I invest to make it come into being. That's what I do. I would submit today that higher education is at an inflection point, that the future trajectory will be very different from the past trajectory. And those who are in leadership position in higher education, they all will have to be venture capitalists. They will all have to create something that doesn't yet exist. And I urge all search committees to think about this. I'm involved, in one situation in a search, and it is all too tempting for search committee to look to the past. And of course, the old guys, they've done more, they look more accomplished, but they've passed their prime. When I was a postdoc, this Cancer Institute in Boston was just starting its research. And I saw the person that was brought in to create this whole research enterprise. He hired two groups of people. One, very accomplished, coming from Princeton and all these big name places. Well, they came at the peak of their career, meaning it was downhill from there. The other group, including my own professor, they were fresh out of postdocs. Among that group, one won a Nobel Prize. A number of them became members of the academy and chairman of departments in other schools. So I leave this thought with all of you. As you think about leadership in higher education, look forward, not backward. So I will conclude as I began by paying tribute to Frank Rhodes. As president of Cornell, he led with clarity of vision, with grace. He brought everyone along with him to realize the vision. He is a textbook case of how leadership makes all the difference to the institution. The action of today's leaders in higher education will determine how the next chapter of higher education in this country will be written. And too much is at stake for our young people, for the professoriate, for the institutions of higher learning, and above all, for the nation at large. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
When we were discussing the lecture, Gerald promised to be provocative, and that he certainly was. We have a couple of minutes before we go up to the 5th floor for the reception, where we can certainly have deeper conversations. But I think we have room for maybe 2 questions here and then carry the conversation upstairs.
Hey, anyone? I see some hands over there. Yeah?
Thank you for,
Oh.
can I go in? Thank you for the futuristic talk. I really love it. I wonder if you can deliberate a little bit more for existing faculty with the proposed changes. Faculty have to retool, right? How do you suggest we do that? Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, if you were a employee in a commercial enterprise, there would be very high expectations. The ivory tower, on the other hand, is a bit more relaxed. I don't think tenure is a good thing. I think faculty has to keep growing, has to keep up with the times. You've got to be ahead of the curve because the students that you train will have to come into the new reality that the future offers in their career. So I'm totally on board with your point that faculty has to grow. And by the way, we should get rid of this idea that people who come into academia would be in academia their whole life. That is my point about co-ops for faculty. You should go out and get a job. And the university should hold your place open. And you could come back. And I bet you when you come back, you'll be a better teacher. That should be a two-way street. This may be crazy, but anyway, that's my thought. Yeah, go ahead, sir. I find it hard too, but I would say, you know, there's a school in San Francisco called Minerva University, and they are very intentional about what thinking attributes they want to inculcate in the teaching. I believe they have a panel of 80 attributes, and every class has to map to, you know, some of those attributes that they want to inculcate in the students. I find it pretty good to be more intentional about it as opposed to be nebulous and just say, oh, I'll teach you how to think. But that school is not very vocational. So can we, in a more vocational setting, and the best example I saw really was this professor of accounting. He graduated from that liberal arts college, went into public accountant. He became partner in a law firm. And then after all that, he came back to the school to teach. And he showed me his syllabus and more than the syllabus, how he interact with the students very intentionally with what he wants to get across in training the students. And he showed me how different it is. His accounting class is from another school, which is a purely business school. And if you were to take accounting there, you would have a very different experience. So I think people need to be intentional about how do you blend the two together. And that's a challenge for you faculty that teach.
Hello. I felt compelled to ask a question partially because I think I might be one of the only recent graduates, though I'm happy to say I was employed immediately after college, though I'm currently unemployed. But my question was, I went to a liberal arts school, a small liberal arts school, but I did sort of have a co-op experience. I came out of college, I already had professional connections, I was able to speak to projects and experiences like you talked about. And then I found myself in a job and I realized, gosh, I don't really like this that much. I have this vocational skill. How do I pivot? And how do I use all of the skills that I've learned? I was a bio major. That's kind of vocational, I think, in some respects. How do I pivot? And how do I use these co-op skills to talk to future employers? And then I get to entry-level positions, I talk, and it seems that with my college degree, like you said, I'm mostly good to be an executive assistant, unless I can speak to these projects. And I can speak to the projects, and I've encountered two situations from the co-op transferable skills. Firstly, the employer will offer me a position where there's no clear deliverable, no clear mentorship, and no way for me to, gives me free reins, and no way for me to actually be successful because I'm not provide mentorship or training. Or secondly, I am so constrained, all I can do is carry coffee. There's no mid-level rut. And I think that's what is affecting my generation. Anyway, so my question is, how can I position myself where I'm getting those guardrails, but I'm also getting that innovation, and I'm actually getting to use my vocational skills in today's, what I learned in my co-ops in today's market? Thank you.
My answer is I don't know. I can talk in generality to the end of many, but I can hardly speak to the specificity of the end of one. And life has no guarantees, and there are setbacks, and that's not the end of the world. We learn more from our setbacks than our good fortune. As articulate as you are, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And you appear to be eminently employable. But the point is, everyone's journey is different. It's all idiosyncratic, to that person. So I cannot speak in generality, nor can any professor teach to that generality or to that specificity of each and every student. We can only speak in general terms, and you have to figure it out, my friend, and you will figure it out. I'm sure you'll do well. Thank you.
It is my unfortunate job in most of these rooms to bring good conversations to an end. So regretfully, I have to do that here, but invite those of you that signed up for the reception to move on up to the 5th floor. But before we do that, Gerald, thank you for being here. The thought and consideration you put into the lecture, the 12 points that we're all going to be thinking about. I think there are some people that are going to be happy with some people that are going to disagree, and perhaps we'll carry it all up to the 5th floor. But lots for us to think about. Thank you for delivering this lecture for us. We have a small token of appreciation for you from ASU.
Thank you very much.